Welcome to Epsilon Theory Shorts. Today's video comes from the Ask Me Anything with Ben Hunt and his guest, Dave Nadig. The question is there a greater risk that bond ETFs, like J&K, will deviate from the underlying securities?
Got it. All right. Now we're going back to J&K.
J&K and HYG.
And HYG. So J&K, junk.
Junk.
Right?
Yep.
So this is for an ETF in junk bonds, credit. HYG.
Same thing. Yep.
The issue here, and I think this is the fear around it, or how to say this, it's not really fear, right? It's that it seems like there's a risk if a lot of money comes, talking about the disjuncture between, I get it with the S&P, and at some point, a lot of people want to buy the S&P, so they buy SPY, and there's a difference then at some point, a few basis points between the value of the SPY and the value of the underlying 500 stocks that make it up. And okay, the market said, okay, we gotta
True that up. Yeah.
True that up, right? That makes a ton of sense to me. It makes less sense to me for when the underlying is, 500 different, bonds that I'm sure a lot of them trade by appointment if they ever trade.
Right.
Right.
Well, that's a really good point. A lot of these get sold once and never show up.
And never trade again.
Right. Never trade again.
Right.
And that's a real issue. So how does it work? That's
How
the
does it
question.
work?
How is it
How does
possible
it
that it
work?
works?
Yeah.
So let me tease into two parts. Bonds in general are their own problematic asset class, especially bond indexes, right? Like AGG, the Bloomberg aggregate, has something like 8,900 constituents. No fund tracking it owns all 8,900 of those bonds.
Right,
So they're
right.
already, you're dealing with an optimized world. So the index.
So already the index, which is separate from the
fund,
ETF,
right? The
right?
index the J&K
The
tracks
index.
is already uninvestable. In the sense that you can't
Right.
find somebody to sell you all those bonds.
It's not uninvestable in the sense that, we have to say that on our,
You can't buy all the things.
It's literally uninvestable.
You just can't buy all the
Right.
things.
It's impossible.
So that doesn't mean it's bad. This has been true of bond indexes since the first bond index was created. Like a lot of bonds just go into an insurance company account and never see the light of day.
Yep.
So what you do is you create a set of statistics that says this is what that portfolio looks like, and that's really what J&K is managed against. It's also what every other bond fund ever made is managed against. So it's not ETF
An
specific.
approximation.
Right.
You're trying to hold a proxy for
This index, right? Because the index is impossible. So every day, the manager at J&K gets to tell all those authorized participants what they have to show up with to make new shares. The default you would think is all the bonds in the index. The reality is it's whatever that manager needs to get his portfolio closer to the index.
Close to the index.
So if he came in being like, God, I'm a little short on triple B and I'm supposed to have a little bit, he may put the basket out there as being like, here's the 12 triple B bonds I'm taking delivery on. And by the way, the other 50% of the basket, just give me cash.
Just give me cash.
Right. And so from that perspective, that's how J&K ends up working. The bigger question to me is what happens in whatever it was, October 2018, when the market locks up, or any number of times the market has locked up.
When the credit market locked up.
And you can't buy any of it.
None of it's trading.
Right. None of it's trading anymore. The ETF.
Except the ETFs are trading.
Usually what happens historically has been then the ETF trades like gangbusters. So all of the liquidity that was in the cash bond market moves to the ETF market. Because if you think about it, if you were the fixed income PM at some endowment and you were trading credit and all of a sudden credit's taking a bath, maybe your opinion is, well, I have a buy point here. Like when these things get to a certain point, I am the buyer because I'm running a credit focused endowment or whatever. Yeah. You can't buy those bonds no matter how crappy they look, but you can watch that ETF, and if it trades to a 20% discount, meaning there is a price for the ETF, but there's nothing but a stale price for the index, you have the opportunity to hit the buy button there. You also have the opportunity to panic sell and be an idiot. Mm-hmm. Like you can, your behavior is your own, but the ETF then just is disconnected from that underlying market. The way I often say it is it becomes price discovery. The less liquid the underlying, the more price discovery happens inside the ETF. The best example, Egypt in the Arab Spring. Market was closed for 36 days, I think. EGPT, the ETF tracking it, never closed, traded all the way through it. And when the Egyptian market opened, it opened up spot on where the ETF said it was going to open. It was price discovery.
It was
It
the market.
was the market.
It was the market.
Right. And we see that anytime we have those hiccups. Russia was the only case in point where that didn't happen because we actually cut them out of the financial system. So it didn't end up unwinding in that case. But for a number of days, you could trade Russia while the markets were locked.
But why don't we have the same problem as with the Volmageddon issue? Is it that there are, I'll call it kind of natural buyers at a price?
But there's the problem with the Volmageddon was actually more one of cascading risk failures, right? And,
gotcha.
And ultimately not having a buyer of last resort at the end of it. And something like J&K, if the underlying bond market just locks up and all of a sudden, when the market reopens, people are going to say junk's worth 20%, and that's what you're going to have to pay, right? Those are going to be the implied yields, right? Everybody's going to sell this stuff into the floor. Eventually, those markets reopen, and then J&K and the market will just absolutely pin right back every time, because they have to mechanically. Otherwise, somebody will arb out that difference for the profit. So the second the market reopens, the APs leap back on, and they book all the profit they can, and then the ETF trades spot on the index again. In the case of something like junk bonds, I would actually say that liquidity in the ETF informs the dealers where to open those bonds when they start trading them again. It's what they look at.
That's absolutely what they look at.
Absolutely.
Like I say, it becomes the price discovery